All right, welcome to a special episode this week. We asked you guys in the Telegram group, we're going to do an AMA. People have been asking for this style of episode, so let us know what you think of this. Make sure you like and subscribe the video on YouTube and comment below to let us know what you think of this. And we'll like to do more of these. Boy, should we just get straight into it? There was some incredible questions in here, also hilarious jokes. So we're gonna just share as many of them as we can. I'll just get us started. The first question is about losses. Obviously, all of us have been in the shit the last few months, as many of us have. I'm sure people listen to this as well. Sergey said how to dollar cost average with no dollars, which was a semi question / joke. Another person, Toon, asked why didn't we sell when Chamath told us to, which I agree. I definitely felt that at the time. But the serious question was Igor. He said, how do you overcome huge losses, financial losses, bad decisions, etc.? Who wants to take that one?
I'll take it. The first question as well, how do you dollar cost average with no dollars? We're going to roll that one in as well. Bilal, we actually did a podcast 2.5 years ago. I can't even remember when it was at this point, where we talked about like the focus should be on like generating upside, and the secondary focus should be on where you store that upside. And I think the last year, we've gone into this with like everybody got a little bit distracted by the fact that people not like the effort to upside ratio got very, very skewed for a minute there. And like this time it's different narrative takes over, et cetera, et cetera. And I think as much as we talk about all of these like nascent technologies on this podcast, the idea that your investment strategy in real time is your income generating activity that you depend upon is just like you're literally playing you're playing against like professional traders, right? Like if you're not just depositing money that you have no use for, you've built the discipline to carve off and invest for long term, versus like getting pulled into this behavior where like you're trying to actually generate an income from playing markets, which is so difficult, as we know, and as history proves to be true. And our friend Nick Majuli was on talking about just keep buying a few episodes ago. So I think like as difficult as it is to hear, it's like if you don't have like if you can't identify a legitimate advantage you have, whether that's like, you know, without breaking any laws, like what is your advantage in this market, right? Where are you in the information hierarchy, when even in a public sense, or like how much due diligence have you done? How many times have you been right on X, Y, and Z before? Like that to me is like knowing yourself is the ultimate unlock in that scenario. Like let's use Trung as an example. Like what Trung does naturally, or the skill set that he's built over time, is a much higher leverage use of his time and staring at charts and speculating on markets, right? I think he'd be the first to admit that. And that was not something and every minute you're spending looking at a chart, you're getting shitter at the thing that makes you money to actually invest with, right? And that narrative is just in the heat of the moment, where like everyone around you, or especially in the internet era when it feels like everyone around you is getting it right, like it takes every ounce of resistance you have to just like log back in to your Google Docs and write another story, right? Or to break down another X, whatever it is you do for a living, or to like sit down and learn, take a tutorial, go show up or read a book or whatever it is. But that's the thing that's actually compounding. And then when nature corrects itself, as it always does, you're sitting there with an advantage, versus like, there's no free lunch. Even if you make money, in that period of time, unless you're going to transition to like trading full time, which is not a recommended career for most people, then you've lost time in that instance too. So I think it's like it's a bug that I think that took hold of us during the COVID era. Like the world just went a little nuts for a couple of years, and now we're like coming down off the
high.
It's a theme that we've actually talked about. It's a theme we've talked about last couple of weeks, and Jack was the one that really brought it up at the beginning of this year. The joke was Jack's like, so our Jack was like, I've had to turn up the heat on visualize value a bit. Like Celia's been asking about the Shopify checkout pages, right? So you mentioned that at the beginning of the year, and let me address the question directly. Like, how do you recover from big financial losses and things of that nature?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't answer the question.
Yeah. So
I think that was still
you
good.
did,
it was a good answer, but
I'll tell you why you did answer the question, Jack. And I just want to hop on your answer. This is how you recover. Build that pointy skill. Make yourself recession-proof. Make yourself personally buffered against these negative turnouts. Listen, in a recession, you might make less money you would, obviously, in bull banging times. But if your skill set is what it is, to Jack's point, there's a world. It's not even a world. I can tell you right now, I will be making more money from my quote-unquote skill set in 6 months from now or a year from now than I was last year, completely separate from what's happening in public markets. It's just because every single day, my audience is getting bigger. Every single day, I'm getting better at my job. I'm getting better at going viral. I'm getting better at getting people's attention, right? Like that is completely separate from the markets. And a year from now, let's say markets drop another 10, 20% on top of the massive drawdown we've had. If I'm personally not making more money than I am today, then I'm a failure. So like, I think Jack's point is 100% correct though, is you have to start removing yourself from this casino we've kind of been living in and really do focus to what you can control. And I think that's a really good answer though. It's like, if you take a big L financially, what can you control, right? It's your own skill set, your own ability to sell, your own ability to market your services to the world.
I think that's a great answer. Go on, Trung, but I didn't want to cut you.
The only thing I add after that is life. I think there's a part of this where the question also said, a big life letdown. So I've had more life letdowns than I've had financial letdowns, mostly because I haven't had money, like a lot of money for most of my life because I've dicked around for my 20s, right? But the only thing I say on the life thing, I think it's applicable to the financial stuff, is it's just never as bad as it. Like you have to get out of that moment, right? Because when you look back, like I look back at some of the, I'll give one example. This is not the worst one, and I haven't had nearly as bad as a lot of people. But like when I was living in the States with my wife, and we're dealing with immigration stuff and XYZ, not even as bad as a lot of people do with immigration stuff, but like Bilal's had the same while working at Google. It was like, this is just a pain, right? This is not nearly the worst pain I've had, but it's the pain that I'm willing to talk about, and it was just literally the pain of not knowing if you might wake up literally one morning and be asked to leave the country, right? Because that's effectively what happened at one point. We were at the airport and we had one border.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, basically decide that our visa wasn't the correct visa, or it should have been switched to XYZ date.
Man, that's the worst.
Yeah, but the only reason I bring that up is like, it's a tangible example of something that was objectively like a shitty situation. But like, I never think about it anymore. I literally never think about it. It's in the moment. It's terrible. It's
the worst thing in the world at that particular moment.
And it's materially affecting your life, right? Like I had a 6-month-old toddler, and it's really difficult to manage, like literally being home, like without a place to be, or like the uncertainty is really it's not great, but felt really bad, like you said, Bilal, at the moment. But I literally never think about it.
Yeah,
there's a great Professor Galloway quote, boys. Nothing is ever as good always. Or as bad as it seems.
That's true. That's very
Which
true.
is a great model for looking at the world. And there's another, I forget where I saw it's a YouTube clip, but it's like Tom Hanks. It's like Tom Hanks, I think, and a couple athletes, other actors, like objectively incredibly successful people sitting around a table, and they're like, what's one piece of advice or one like thing that you keep with you all the time? And they say, this too shall pass. And that's applicable in good and bad situations. Like you're riding high or at the top of your career, like the world is going nuts for whatever it is you're producing. This too shall pass. You're at the depth of your, like you're in despair, something terrible happens to you. This too shall pass. It's like just cultivating the ability to step back from it and like observe it as far away as you possibly can. And also every time you experience something devastating, if you can trace that back to like a bit of irresponsibility on your part in some way, or something that, you know, in hindsight you could have done a little differently to avoid the consequences being so severe, that's definitely more on the financial side than things that can happen in your life, obviously. But each and every time, hopefully that's what experience is like getting a little bit more familiar with the laws of the universe and acting accordingly next time.
Yeah,
well,
100%.
there's something. So Bilal, before I want you to answer this question, but Jack mentioned this last episode when we were talking about. We had asked him, "What are your thoughts about ETH BTC long term?" And then you had mentioned something along the lines of, you know, your mental model of it was you're more likely to stick around and build in it, right? And I think a big point of that you kind of made was the also bet you made in that segment financially wasn't enough to like materially change your life. Like you could be quote unquote wealthier. Like I think everybody listening to this would be like 6 months ago, but like there's very few things that would actually materially change my day-to-day life today. If you gave me $50 million tomorrow, I'd probably be doing 90% of the same stuff I do. The other 10% might be a little bit more degen, but like, I want to be on Twitter for 2 hours. I'm going to have to play with my kid. I'm going to probably do something to annoy my wife, but then make up for it later in some capacity. Now with more money to do that. But like my day-to-day, Jack, you said it yourself, it's like your day-to-day probably wouldn't change, like the speaking specifically to like your crypto investments, but like even if there's a massive bag of money dropped in my lap tomorrow, I've gotten my life to a point where like I know what my day looks like, and I like that. Right?
That's amazing. Well, that's a great like little thought exercise to think through for a lot of people, because the way you just described it there is like if you just drop a bunch of money in your bank account, what would you be doing differently? And if you can, obviously, for most people, you're not getting to that stage tomorrow, right? Like it's you have a job, you have whatever that you can't just leave. But I think that's quite a nice like frame of reference to think through. Like even one of the questions we've got coming up is about where we live, and like as you guys know, in the last 3-4 years, even before the pandemic, I was spending a lot of time abroad and we were traveling. And while I don't have kids, I'm trying to make the most of that because I know it's much harder in the future. And during that very flexible time, I wasn't maximizing income, but I kind of had to balance out, like you just said, what are the things I want to do? What are the things I want to spend my time doing? And like, you know, stuff that gives me energy essentially. And that was the basis of now what I've been doing since then. Obviously, there's always things you don't want to do, right? But like if you can minimize that, that is kind of, to me, that's worth more than money, right? Like a lot of people who have $50 million don't even have that. Like in fact, I'd say majority of them don't, because they don't get to do the things that they want to do a lot of the time because they have obligations with their company or whatever. So that's a good frame of reference. To answer the question specifically as well, how do you overcome huge losses, financial losses, bad life decisions? Jack, what you said there, the Professor Galloway quote or whoever's come up with that in the past, you can apply that to yourself as well, not just situations, but like yourself, when you're normally not as good as what people think you are and normally not as bad as people think you are. Like that's a similar thing, but a slightly different frame, which is everyone's like, oh man, Jack, you're absolutely killing it. Like when I first met Jack, I was like, oh, you're killing it. When I spoke to Trung, I'm like, man, you're just smashing it. But I don't know all the things going on in your life that I don't get to see, right? And in your head, you're like, oh yeah, I'm just still trying to establish myself and whatever. And on the flip side, when you do something bad or something messes up, you lose your job, let's say. That is another one where like you might not have lost your job because you did a terrible thing. It just might not be the right fit, or you're going to move on to something else. And so I think those are the sort of things where when I've had those like ups and downs as well, you have to kind of zoom out and say like, all right, I'm in my head, I'm overthinking this, I'm emotional right now, I'm overthinking it, And that is the best thing. Like, it's kind of cliche, but time really does heal a lot of the bad things that have happened. But honestly, the other part I will be honest about is sometimes it doesn't, just time isn't enough. So those are the things where, like, really reflecting, you know, whether that's working with someone, if it's a real serious thing, you need to talk to a therapist or, you know, a friend or whatever. But even just like creating space for yourself is something I've done a lot more of since I've been self-employed, because I value it. Is literally every morning I pretty much go for an hour walk, like 30 to 60 minute walk. And I do listen to stuff sometimes. Like, I'm listening to podcasts and music, but like nowadays I'm trying to do that less as well, because it's the only time I'm not taking stuff in. And those times, or not recently, I've been going to the sauna again. It's the first time since COVID. And in the sauna, I'm like, okay, I'm tempted to bring an AirPod in because I'm like addicted to listening to stuff. But I was like, all right, it's 20, 30 minutes. Let me just chill. And it's the only time you're really like just reflecting on what's going on. And through that process, that helps. The other thing I'll say, and I'm sure you guys agree with this, is writing it out. Like that's something that's helped me a lot, is like, even just personally, it doesn't have to be sharing it publicly, is writing out like things that have happened, whether that is good or bad. Like, you go on a trip, even keeping a note of, oh, this was a fun day, me and my girlfriend did this, we went to this thing. You go back and you read that 3 years later, is so amazing. You like literally go back to that moment. And on the flip side, when bad stuff's happened, like I've done this for myself. In fact, there's I forgot what it's called. It's like Jordan Peterson has this like self-authoring thing. And it's basically, you don't need to buy his thing. It's basically just writing out chapters of your life in a book, basically. And like writing that out, like honestly, I dealt with some stuff from my childhood, which was like quite intense, of like stuff at school and bullying and like bad stuff that happened, racism. And I had all these like ideas and stories in my head, but until you write it on paper and you basically organize it, it puts it in an actual place. You basically think through writing. And so I think that was something that has also helped me get more space from it, and then actually deal with it and say, oh, well, you know, bad stuff has happened to every single person listening to this, right? So being able to like put it out there, structure it, and then take space from it, it kind of gives a bit of closure in a way as well. But yeah, I'm sure there's people listening to this who have been through way worse things that might not help, but maybe it might help someone. So yeah, I would take some space from it. All right, should we move on to the next question, boys? Anything else before we move on from that? Really good question, though.
Yeah, that was a great question.
Triple threat there. So we kind of talked a little bit about this last week. So let me just see if there's, Pung asked, are you guys still hodling? We answered that last week.
Yeah.
Viraj Shah says, what are you invested in currently? It's a kind of similar thing. I mean, I'm happy to share if you want, but it's nothing that exciting. It's a split between, you know, crypto, stocks, mainly real estate, and so that's pretty much the general split, like most people have, if you have any sort of investments. Anything else there you guys want to share, or is that not
I'm
really
similar.
worth?
I'm a lot of probably some split between crypto and high tech growth stocks, which is not great.
Yeah.
But again, I'll add to the original point here is I've begun thinking a lot more of my ability to earn income.
That's the great point.
Right? That is, I mean, I thought about it over the year, because listen, in the CFA, that's literally like lesson number one. Is like when you're making a financial plan for somebody, like the rule of thumb is always this is like the old traditional financial advisor rule of thumb. The way that you're supposed to invest as an individual was you would split up your stock to a bond portfolio. So this is like before crypto.
Yeah.
It's basically like when you're younger, you take more risks, right? So
60-40, you mean? Or?
Exactly. It's a 60-40, but even like 70-30. It's like whatever age you are.
So as you're older, the bonds go up, stock goes down.
The bonds go up, stock goes down. But I mean, that's 101, right? That's literally financial advising CFA 101. That's actually how my mental model for investing has been for a long time. Like I kind of wish I didn't take the CFA because of that. But what it is now is like, but the biggest thing, which is always, and most people will know this, the number one source, and Jack talked about it, is last week, he's like, or just early this episode, if you're trying to make income from day trading, that is no bueno. But like, you really have to think about your personal capital, right, as the biggest chunk. Yeah,
that's a great answer. So like, to answer what are you invested in currently? If you were thinking of focus, it's yourself.
Yeah, Trung T fan.
Trung T fan.
There it is. At Trung
Respect,
T
man.
Fan.
I agree. I would double that and say the same.
Leveraged up.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
true.
Jack. Well, here it is, Jack. Let's throw it to you because you made a massive dent in the internet, becoming kind of one of the poster people of taking charge of their own life, right? And really, maybe not the poster child, but you know what I mean. It's like you clearly came up quickly.
Yeah, good example either way.
Yeah.
Yeah, you like the idea of, I've talked more specifically about this in loads of different places, but the idea of like an asset in a non-traditional sense, an asset that you control, an asset that could be as intangible as like what people like. Trung is funny. That's an asset that is like decentralized across 440,000 people's minds, right? Funny business news. That is like a new model for people, especially like internet native economies where you can wake up every day and make something that is like accretive in a compounding sense. It's a very different model than going to work, clocking in 8 hours or 10 hours, which there's obviously a value exchange happening there, but you're building an asset that you, in many cases, don't have equity stake in or upside in. And this is not a one versus the other situation either. We've talked about this, I think, before, where, building, like spending the time outside of other engagements to even begin to pursue your curiosity and turn that into something that like allows you to connect with people is like the starting point for creating something entirely new. There's I think we could probably get to a point where we put together some good resources on this stuff. I like talking about this stuff a lot. I think we have like a good, and we always bring up a different point every time we talk about it. But for most people, like this feels like a really interesting point in time where COVID, work from home, remote, great resignation, crypto, like everybody's a media company, all of these different converging trends and ideas are, I think, going to drastically change. I don't imagine like a 401k is as common as a vehicle for like financial independence as it is today in 10, 20, 30 years. Like the world is just getting more and more logarithmic, as we have discussed.
Yeah. I hate this. Let's pivot this conversation. So Jack, would you actually want to break down your portfolio before I kind of veer this?
Not investment advice, but
no, definitely not investment advice. Good amount of crypto, equities. Like we work with a great tax planner, so we try and do all of the like maximum contributions on Roth and all that kind of stuff. Who knows whether that'll turn out to be a good idea or not. And then a few angel investments, which actually seem to be holding up all right. I made them over the last couple of years, mostly in like circles where my competence was pretty dialed. Yeah, education and some internet businesses that felt to me like they had had a good shot based on what I'd learned in my like experience growing a similar business, which I think is a solid place to evaluate something from versus, being outside of and like investing in, it's a Mungerism, right? Like where you have a core competence and you can evaluate something with a bit of an edge. Remains to be seen how that edge will play out, but definitely a few hopeful for, they're like lottery payouts, those guys, right? It's like it's either 0 or it's 1,000x. That's really your outcome.
Yeah.
I'm here the other thing I'll add to this is I think we're definitely all young enough to still be taking these shots, right? Like that's the thing is the one thing I would say to answer that question more broadly is, man, if you're young, this is my lesson. I don't have any regrets. I did stuff that maybe I shouldn't have done, but I don't have regrets. If you're a youngin', get at it. Like, like don't wait till 35 to start your Twitter and shit posting. Start that now.
Yeah, that's
that. Yeah, man, like,
that's true.
Listen, I sped run the audience building, but it would be stupid right now because I did clearly have the temperament for it if I just started a decade ago. So if you're young, you don't have a ton of responsibilities, you start taking shots. Like it's just, and start doing stuff that'll compound.
Yeah, I think another frame on it is like, for you, Trung, is like, as long, like, I think people tend to think about this as like, I want to leverage this into like a product style business, or like really separate my time and income, which is one way to do it. But it's also like, there are probably 50 publications in the world that would hire you without even talking to you right now. You know, like it creates optionality in a lot of different ways. I don't think like, you know, you don't necessarily go and have to try and start the next Facebook, which I've been talking about for years and years, is like, you know, people think that to create like an internet business is to like have to create this monolithic monopoly tech platform. It's like, you're going to lose like 999 times out of 1,000 versus like just increasing the surface area of people that see how you think, what like the type of work you can produce. That can lead to all sorts of like interesting different outcomes. And I think being close to it and seeing people like, you know, the Trungs of the world you might feel like, oh, I'm so far behind that I shouldn't even get started. But the reality is, like, if you can meet half a dozen people that can drastically change the trajectory of your life, like ridiculously so. All of the real incredible connections that I've made happened way, way earlier in my journey, and still true now. Like, and I don't know what I would attribute that to, but I'm just saying, like, putting yourself out there initially and like just having the enthusiasm to show up every day. Like the people who are starting out around the same time, or the people that see you doing it when like you're providing something that they needed or they're interested in, just the butterfly effects of doing that are really profound. So yeah, Trung, just echoing Trung's advice, like get at it.
I'm just going to answer to build on what you said and answer the next question, which was related to this anyway. Matt O'Brien asks, what actions are you taking to insulate yourself from the impending recession?
Damn, that's dark, Matt. That's dark, Matt.
Matt Legend as well. So he... basically what you guys are talking about is answering that already, and I'll just add my experience from doing that in a different way to you guys, because as you guys know, I'm not as like public with like I've used to tweet a little while ago, and I've stopped for last year basically because I should dedicate time to doing that, but you know what I'm like when I do it, I'm all in. And for the last year, I've focused on this, I focused on my other business and stuff like that. So it's just a matter of like picking your lane and knowing why you're picking that lane and sticking to it. What I'll say is the way I've done it in a different way is how I think about a recession like this is I have been thinking about it for some time. I've been trying to build up stuff that gives me income without me having to turn up every day. And a lot of it, like most people don't even know about, because it's kind of like direct deals I've done with people that pays me out over time. So I'll give an example. When I first left my last job, which was 3-4 years ago, I didn't have any income for a few months, and I looked at my skills, and it kind of goes to what you said earlier, which is, you know, you'd still need to build a skill set in the first place, right? And I had a few different skills, like on the business development side, partnerships, marketing, whatever, but the one that was just very easily monetizable was this digital marketing stuff that I'd done for a long time. So I said, okay, I don't necessarily want to do this straight off, you know, forever, but let me find a way I can use that in the short run to figure out some income. And now there's literally things that hit, is it 15 today? Something that's going to hit tomorrow when this comes out, actually, is funnily enough, which I pitched this maybe 2 years ago to people, and I basically went and created relationships with companies that didn't have marketing teams, and I said to them, hey, I saw you've got this product, do you need help with marketing? And this is my background. They're like, hey, no, we're like engineers, we don't really care about that, or we don't really have the time and energy for it. So then the second pitch was, cool, what if I did it for you, and like, even if you don't want to pay me for that, I can just do a revenue share. So it's essentially affiliates, right? But like, they didn't have an affiliate program. So what I did with a few of them, mostly like SaaS companies, like small little tools, I created an agreement with them, and they found a way to track this all, and I spent my own money to drive traffic to them. And
Amazing.
over like, just to put it, to give an actual example, it's not like it's made me multimillionaire, but it pays for my rent pretty much, right? So that is something that took me not too much time, but a little bit of creative thinking. This other stuff is on a even larger scale. But again, it won't last forever, but it's something that I pitched a long time ago, and now I can still focus my efforts on all the things I'm doing, and on the side, some of those things will pay dividends essentially. And it's just a completely random thing. Like, I didn't even have a big plan to do it. It just, in the moment, I thought, well, why they've got a problem I can help them with. How do I find a way that everyone agrees on the value exchange? So anyway, that's just one other example, is thinking a little bit more outside the box of, first of all, developing the skill, and then two, how you can bring it to more people. So that's kind of how I've been thinking about it. All right, should we go next?
I think that's great.
Yeah.
I was just going to say one thing, Bilal, like there's so much unsexy opportunity out there. Like, I think the contrary to this is like holding two ideas in your head at the same time, like building the front end, having this like media entity that represents how you think and all this stuff is a great arbitrage opportunity. But there's also like millions of things that no one can be asked to do or no one's good at, or not that's where the real, like, and to be honest, like the older I get, the more interested I am in like having the unsexiest business in the world that is just ticking away. And because nobody wants to work on that stuff, and everybody's competing for views on a platform with a half-life of 6 hours, like, here's a tweet that did amazingly well. Guess what? Tomorrow you got to come up with another one.
Yeah.
There's
exactly.
like, there are opportunities that exist on the internet where the opposite is true, right? You build something, and just over time it just grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. And, that's a whole nother episode to get into what those things are. But it is.
That's a great point. Yeah.
There's great like upside in just digging through the stuff that is so like unsexy, because you just know nobody's doing it, because that's not cool.
That actually sounds like an episode you guys should do, or we should do in July.
Yeah. We should
get the 10, like, and get, maybe we'll hit it. I know you specifically, Jack, have a lot of friends in that space. So
yeah, we could do some, like, I know people that like have the most ridiculous businesses that you just, and
we need to do this.
Definitely. Just like kicking off obscene amounts of money, and you wouldn't have any idea.
That's the best. They're the best types of business, man. Like, I mean, obviously, if you create something great, that's much bigger, world changing, great, good for you as well. But sometimes, like, most people are really just trying to create a better life for themselves and their family. That's the first step. And being able to divorce yourself from having to go to a job every day is another step for that. I think we should definitely feature some of those.
They probably wouldn't be very happy, mate, because they'll have competitors now.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
All right, let's take a great question, Matt. Well, actually, let me answer Matt's question. I'm actually not. Same with Bilal. Have been mentally preparing for stuff like this for a couple of years now, and a big thing actually is having been able to do what I've done in the past 18 months is building a bigger audience that has insulated me in a way. I didn't
more optionality for you too, right? You
just more optionality, and the larger point I'll make is this: I don't think about the impending recession. What I do think about is, and it's not even cliche, it's like I just know what my day is going to look like. That's the honest truth. Bull market, recession, I know what every day I want to be doing. And if you can get yourself to that point, it's the first question is, can you find something where that is actually possible, where you actually enjoy that, right? Because once you get to that point, it's just like it's same as a $50 million drop in my lap. If we're going into back-to-back quarters of negative GDP growth, it's just not going to affect my life in the sense of, like, I know what my day-to-day is going to look like, right?
Yeah, completely. All right, boys, good chat on that one. Next question was from Ray, essentially about where we want to live. There's a couple of people asked this, but Ray specifically said Bilal's back in London. He said he would explain it a few episodes back. Someone else was asking where you want to live. The only reason I brought that one up is to clarify, I'm not living in London. I'm still in New York. I just spend time there seeing my family, and LA for the missus family, and for a little bit for work. So, but yeah, this is, I think, actually quite an interesting question. So maybe I'd send it over to you guys. Where do you want to live?
Well, Jack, why don't we ask the guy that just bought a house? Talk us through your decision-making matrix.
Well, some of it was reactionary. Like we found out we were going to have a baby. We were living in 450 square feet in New York in the middle of COVID.
Man,
I was like,
that is crazy.
nah, this doesn't sound very good. So we went to LA for a month looking for places. We looked at probably 45 houses in LA.
To buy.
And to rent at that time, where I was like, I'd been like getting worn out of New York for a while, like been there 11 years or something. And like the business was taking off at that point. So I was just not taking advantage of being in New York the same way I was like previously, you know, as a
young buck.
Young lad. And
Young gunslinger.
Yeah. And then just got to a point where like, oh, I want to have a car, a driveway, and a different like lifestyle.
Go to Costco. That's a big upgrade. Yeah.
Big car guy. So LA was the first, I visited LA probably 24 times working over the course of those 10 years and done holidays and stuff out there. And we got out there and it was just carnage. Like the housing market was complete carnage. Like people had the exact same idea as us that were way better capitalized than we were. And like to get that, like the criteria that we had, like that we wanted to live in a house just made it like completely infeasible. And then like, weirdly enough, it was kind of a snap decision to do the Nashville thing. Like we got some friends here, but we were driving back across. So we drove from LA to New York, which is a lot of time in the car, a lot of existential conversations about what you want to do with your life. And we're like, oh, why don't we just try somewhere else for a year? Like it looks like we're in the middle of this situation for the foreseeable future. This is like the first 4 months after COVID. This is like July 2020. So it's just like, no one's ever going outside again. You're never going to see anybody again. Like there was no even talk of coming out of it. So like, oh, we'll just go and rent a house somewhere where we're going to have a bit more space and, you know, we can get out and walk and stuff like that. Because New York was like, you're wearing a gas mask to go outside and walk the dog. It was just nuts, man. It was just crazy. But like, this is where
I think you were doing that, mate. I saw the picture. Yeah. I remember.
Well, I was in, I had the zero hedge feed on COVID. So pre mainstream.
You were on the biology tip too.
Although I guess that zero hedge feed is looking pretty similar right about now.
Yeah. I try and stay off it now. Anyway.
So how do you feel now? You've been in Nashville for a little while now. So how do you feel with the decision so far?
It's great. I mean, we left for a little while, and then like the contrast of leaving made us want to come back, and that's why we bought.
When you went to Atlanta, when you were in Atlanta.
Yeah. We rented for a year. We had to like evacuate because the house had toxic mold in it. Yeah, so we're in Atlanta for 6 months, and one day we just look at each other. It's like Nashville is actually a great place to live.
Why Nashville?
We already had 12 months of experience living there.
No, why there in the first place? Why that first?
Oh, just like we had some friends there, been there before. Okay. No state income tax. That was another factor. Okay. So this was when like the great, people were talking about Miami and Nevada and stuff. Like, I don't want to live in Miami, man. It's a good place to go for a weekend, but it sounds like a grim place to live, to be honest.
Yeah, fair.
No offense to anybody that lives there, but my relationship with Miami is not not that kind of relationship.
Yeah. So can you imagine 26-year-old Jack in Live or whatever it's called?
Yeah, mate.
Doing some wild
things. You don't have to imagine it, mate. It's happened many times, but it's not.
He's got the Magnum a Goose. You know this one?
I got a picture of it somewhere, yeah.
Well, I went out the other day in Soho. My friend, who I don't do any of this, my very Euro friend, invited me to his birthday. Insane, the biggest bottle of rose I've ever seen.
Wait, bro, you know what I'm talking about, right?
It was so big.
No, the funniest is, man, I love these. When the Mavericks beat the Miami Heat in the 2011 finals, he had Dirk Nowitzki pulling out the Magnum a Goose. I'm like, oh, that's ace. I can hop.
Yeah. What about you? Because you've moved around. You lived in Asia for a while. You've been in Boston.
Yeah, I moved around.
Back to Vancouver.
Well, to answer the question, as with everything, it's contextual, right? If you're young, I can never live in Asia now. It's too hectic. like the super mega cities, like 10, 15 million people. So I lived in Saigon, and the only other places I'd even consider living in Asia, or that we've, like my wife and I have even jokingly talked about, is like Singapore, Hong Kong, Manila, where her family's from, or Ho Chi Minh City. And like these are all super cities, right? 10, 15 million people. It's hot AF. Um, Varying degrees of cleanliness. Singapore is super, super clean. Hong Kong's got a good griminess to it, but obviously with the whole China situation, that's its own world. So I'd probably be down to like Ho Chi Minh City and Manila. I couldn't do it. I want to raise.
And you're far away from your family by that point, right? Your family in Canada.
Yeah, everybody's in Vancouver on my side, but my wife's side is in Manila. But even then,
they actually they're from there. I didn't know that. I wasn't sure if she was like Canadian as well or something like.
Yeah. So it's just I personally want land. Like probably why Jack went to Nashville. It's like it's nice to have a backyard. I don't have a backyard right now, but it's like it's nice to have greenery everywhere. Like Vancouver, ton of greenery. The negative with Vancouver is that housing prices are absolutely insane. But the way I've been able to square the circle is internet native businesses, right? It's like I work for the internet, which helps, and I think would be the largest takeaway I have for this. So to answer the question directly, how do you choose where to live? Different with your age group, totally different when you're married with a kid. Like, you will want space. It's just like, it's inevitable. You're going to want space. You start thinking about school for the kid and like the neighborhood you want to be in. So all this like cliche stuff that you probably read about, but don't even spend a second on when you're younger. But dude, like every single day, the older I get, it's just like, I thought very cynically about it too, actually. So we're up in the Pacific Northwest now. I literally just like a year ago looked at the map and I'm just like, oh, there's like very few places in the world that are protected from the insanity of what's going around the world, right? Like, so Europe obviously is super close to North Africa and the Middle East, and that region is not super stable. And then you kind of have Russia, that situation that's going on. Obviously, Europe's a big continent, but the whole point is that those places are still kind of on your doorsteps, right? And then Canada has always been quite secluded. This is like a benefit, and if you want to use the word like, what's that word? It's not benefit, but like the idea that you kind of have these positives, right? Kind of built in is Canada is there. It makes us a little bit oblivious, a lot of the citizens, but I think I've been global enough to understand what's going on in the world. But like Vancouver, BC, look at the map. I'm gonna pull it up for the watchers here. It's like there's not much like the biggest danger for Vancouver, BC is the 9.5 Richter earthquake that hasn't happened yet. And otherwise, if you're looking at places where if the apocalypse is happening, we have fresh water, we have hydropower, we have a lot of like resources and forestry.
Sounds like you've been reading Zero Hedge here, Trump.
Yeah, but this is how I've been thinking about it, right? It's like if you're actually thinking about the world falling apart, is like there are worse places to be than Vancouver, BC on the map here. Let me pull it up, just how I visually thought about it. Yeah, so this is how this is how I zero hedged it to Jack's point. Here we go. So if you actually look at the situation here, so people always talk about United States being basically a large island, which is why it always militarily the United States is like impregnable. We have Canada in the north, a small border, not a huge border with Mexico. But it's a big border, but like it's a manageable border despite what we're hearing. Like they're not sending a massive army up from the south, right? They have in the past. That was in the 19th century, but that was before America.
We got to squeeze in a fun fact fan here for you guys.
Student of history, man. These are the things that plague people that study history, right?
Well, actually, the Mexico-U.S. War of the 1840s, 1850s is actually super interesting. But anyways, look at BC here. So I'm right here. What is the threat here?
Alaska could get a little brave, man.
Right? You know what I mean? Alaska could get a little bit brave. So that actually kind of played into it. It's like there's that. The greenery is a big part. I want the greenery. It's very important to me. I want a little bit more space. And being able to work on the internet is a big benefit where you can actually choose to live in BC because the local job market's not great. So my final lesson is this. Because of remote work, I understand that there's fluctuations between how flexible certain companies are, how individuals are able to pull it off. also with the privilege of having different passports. I had the privilege of being born in Canada because my parents were Vietnamese refugees here. So I won that lottery, fully acknowledge that. Having said that, Jack is another example, internet first entrepreneur native. If you can do that, the optionality of where you can live opens quite a bit. And I think Jack kind of actually talked about it when he was explaining when they made the decision to leave New York. If you have that situation, start opening the lens up about where you can live, because I think you'll find a lot of interesting places.
Yeah.
Balaji's writing a book about it, isn't he? The Network State.
The Network State.
Coming soon.
All right, I'll quickly answer my one as well, because mine is, even though Vancouver is obviously a massive city in its own way as well, I'm obviously in New York. Jack's lived here, and I'm still here. It's obviously one of the most expensive places in the world to live. And you know how I think. I'm definitely weighing up the pros and cons all the time. Like, does it still make sense to be here? I've been here for 9 years now. I will say for me personally, I mean, I also don't have kids yet. So that might change maybe in the future, how I think about this. But even for now, the plan is probably still to be here. But yeah, so for me, I grew up in London, massive city, always loved the kind of craziness of cities, but I lived in, like suburbs. So it wasn't like I'm like walk outside in the middle of Manhattan until many years later. But that kind of like the craziness of a city and the diversity you get and the diversity of experiences and all that fun stuff is something I really rank really highly at the moment. And again, 10 years from now, that might change. So that's kind of one of the reasons I still live here. I will say moving to Brooklyn has been a massive change. It feels like a completely different life. So, before I lived in the West Village and East Village in downtown Manhattan for 7 years, like literally adult playground, right? Like you walk downstairs and everything you want is there. You don't need, I never took a train. I walked around everywhere, took a bike. Incredible lifestyle, very expensive, but just great for being single in the city, basically. Now it's very different. Now I wanted more space. So I live right next to a massive, beautiful park, 5 minutes away. The other thing that I value really highly is like being able to just randomly meet up with friends or like people that I care about. In like I'm quite spontaneous with social stuff. So a lot of my friends who listen to this will know, like Friday, 3 p.m., they'll get a message from me often to be like, hey, you want to pop over here? And it's just the fun, the excitement of the adventure of like, oh, what's going to happen? And as I've got older, obviously I do that less, but I still really value just being able to see people I care about in a very quick, easy way. Whereas like in LA, when we're there, you have to plan it out way ahead of time. You have to drive, get stuck in traffic. And so here, most people are very close. I can see people, I can get 6 people together in, on an afternoon, probably quite easily. And so, yeah, in my current stage, I'm optimized for that sort of stuff. I will say I also did the kind of nomad stuff for a little while. If you guys have probably heard me talk about it before. It was in Argentina for 3 months, Mexico City for a couple months, Colombia, like a bunch of different places. And previously I lived in Dublin, Ireland, in the countryside in England. So I've done like quite a few different things. And so where I still land is I still optimize for being able to see people quite easily. And the craziness, I just think that enriches my life a lot. But yeah, most of my time is mostly at home, like just cooking at home, doing boring stuff, chilling at home. But
you think you'll stay in New York?
I think at the moment that's probably the plan. I think the other big thing is, and this might be boring for people, but the parents, right? Like my parents don't live here, and that's obviously a really big thing for me. My girlfriend's parents live in California, so right now we're kind of in between. So it's the kind of best scenario at the moment, and we both like being here. So all those things, I think over time as things change, your circumstances change, your parents' situation change, maybe that would adjust. I would probably live in London again for sure. Like I like it a lot, but I think that is not, it's not just me I think about, it's also my girlfriend and her family is a big part of that decision too. So yeah, that's kind of how I've netted out to where I am now.
2 comments. First comment is, I love that 3 p.m. Friday Bilal came out. So let's bar hop in Bilal. That's a new nickname.
I'm gonna have to take Trung out soon. Me and Trung are gonna get at it soon.
We're gonna get at it soon. Bar hop in Bilal, 3 p.m. on a Friday. That's hilarious. Everybody's waiting for that text.
Could be a Tuesday, to be fair, but it depends. Right. I mean, I'm literally after this recording, so maybe that too.
Well, I'll tell you what's funny about that is I had that exact. I mean, that was my mindset basically through my entire 20s. I'm like, what's the closest proximity I can be to a squad where we can hit the streets immediately?
Yeah, the streets.
Yeah. So that's a joke, right? Hit the street. Always. This is how I used to do it. I was texting my, yo, you hit the streets tonight? And the answer was always yes. The other thing I'd add, and I didn't include it in my answer, was yes. The family part was, I mean, in the reality, probably the biggest factor. So I probably should put that first. Forget about like the zero heads. Like,
I know your dad listens to this as well. So
I mean, that's the reality. Like my immediate family is in the city, and I grew up here. A lot of friends here. The nostalgia really took over. It's like, and a lot of people I know that left Vancouver have all come back. I don't know if that's not the same for every city, but I'd imagine there's a lot of stories like that of cities and communities in every, like I'm sure where you guys are from, some people left and all came back. Maybe
that's not, no, that's true. So you guys are out for another 10 minutes or so?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's just keep, because we've got some good questions here. We'll bang these out. Great question, by the way, whoever asked that. These are a couple quick ones. Is ETH the new Luna? JD said, is Ethereum the next Luna? What are the two differences between chains to keep us alive? I don't know if we need to opine on that one.
Yeah, I think we covered enough
too much
BTC last week. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that, so let's maybe skip that one. A couple funny ones. 69K. Are we still standing till Bitcoin 69K?
Yes.
Trung is definitely be standing for a few years.
Might be standing for a while.
Actually, my favorite response was a guy called Chris responded, more like $69. So I think that's maybe going to get there quicker. Another quick one here is Vladimir asked, how did you three meet? I think we've talked about this on the pod before.
All internet.
All the internet, yeah.
I met Bilal from the Trends the Trends entrepreneur group, which is part of the Hustle. And then I met Jack, and I met Jack from Twitter. I think Bilal and Jack met from Twitter. Yeah,
I think we met on Twitter, and we did a couple podcasts together, and that's how we got to know each other. And then we all three knew each other through the internet, and I'd noticed that we all had similar humor and sending stuff to each other, and we ended up floating the idea of trying this out as an episode of Creator Lab, and then eventually we decided let's just do it ourselves as its own podcast. So that's kind of how we met.
And by the time this episode comes out, Bilal and I will have met in person for the first time.
Which is crazy.
I had yet to meet Jack. Bilal and Jack have met. So
I know we'll definitely get one at some point, all three of us, and hopefully get to meet people as well. All right, so we did that one. This one's a bit more of a serious one. I feel like we kind of touched on it a little bit, but maybe we tried to give a short answer to this. This is from Kay. No full name here, very cryptic. Are you an optimist or a pessimist about politics and financial events in the world in the longer term, 5 to 10 years in brackets? What's your reasoning? Do you guys have a shortish answer to that?
My shortest answer is, if you read history, as we talked about, being a fun fact fan, and there's always this, especially in the age of the internet, there's always this feeling that we're in the worst situation ever. And it's just not even remotely close to true. So my perspective is, I think if you look at a long time horizon, humanity is getting better. It doesn't mean, and the conditions in terms of medicine, the level of living, the minimum level of living, it's improving. It can be much better, but it is a lot better than it was 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years, 400 years ago. Trust me, you would not want to be the richest person in the world in 1915, right? Like, that's just the reality. And so my last final answer on that, and it's just more of a life philosophy, is I believe that humanity will improve collectively. It doesn't mean that there isn't awful things happening, but I think we can't have the myopia thinking this is the worst time period, because it's not.
Yeah, that's fair. Jack, what about you, mate? I know you've probably had a few zero hedge days, but you always seem to be an optimist to me, and you call yourself a recovering pessimist, I think. So
I did. I used to. Yeah, it used to be my Twitter bio originally.
Yeah.
I'm bullish on humanity, boys. I also think the other crazy factor is like just getting exposed to outliers constantly, like by function of you asking that in Telegram and knowing who we are. You're on Twitter, I would imagine, more than the average person, which is, just surfacing the outlier events constantly over and over and over again. And just put your phone down, touch some grass, man. And there's lots to be enjoyed out there.
All types of grass.
Yeah, all types. Like the 5 minutes from Bilal's house.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. No, but it's a valid question. Like it definitely, there's definitely a huge like feeling. I think collectively people, right now the market is pretty indicative of humanity's near-term outlook. And there's obviously things happening in the world that have driven things in that direction. But just there's another it was a Galloway thing. I read Principles, Ray Dalio's book a long time ago. I might butcher the quote, but it's like, you are like incredibly significant and incredibly insignificant at the same time. I think that idea of, if you want to make a positive contribution to the world, you have to lean into both of those statements in some respects. So we're here and we're going to try and do our best while we are. That's my answer.
Yeah.
Well, actually, let me add one.
Go on, Tron. Go ahead, Jack.
I was going to finish with one thing. Like one thing I listened to recently that I think I would recommend if you're in that current state is, I think it's Naval. I forget the name of the guy he's interviewing, but it's basically about knowledge is the unlock, right? Like as humans, the thing that we are unable to see is like the things that knowledge unlocks in the future. Like everything around us is a product of like a discovery that happens and then is popularized. So to look back at that and to look forward with the assumption that we're going to just stop learning things and stop accruing knowledge and is kind of a crazy thing to hang your prediction on the future of humanity on. So I'll actually dig that up and get it. There's another article about resource depletion, or like, are we running out of resources? And the same theory is applied there, where it's like, no, well, it depends how you, like, knowledge is the only resource. Is how you convert that knowledge to and start applying it to improve the human condition. So we haven't stopped discovering things, and hopefully, we should probably make this a part of the podcast more often. Like, I see way more people moving in the direction of trying to encourage the pursuit of knowledge now than I ever have in my life. I think there's a real appetite for it. So hopefully good things to come. And just the disruption of institutions that aren't making those changes as fast as they could be.
Yeah. Trung, you were going to say something when Jack...
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm taking a bit more into the weeds. Totally agree with Jack on underestimating what is possible just based on our inability to extrapolate from the present. But a more tactical look, it's just a more recommendation, is any of the listeners here, we've mentioned him in the past, or maybe we haven't, Peter Zahan. I listened to him. He's a geo strategist. He wrote about Ukraine being invaded by Russia 7 years ago. He basically predicted it to the year that it happened. And he's very popular in the geopolitical space. I'd recommend literally just going to your favorite podcast player, type in Peter Zahan, because he's going right now on a book tour for his new book. And there's going to be a lot of political instability in the world because the U.S. is taking less of a global role. And he talks to what the implications of that mean. And it means a lot of volatility. So not to say that it's peaches and cream, but I would lay that out there. And I'd be happy to try to get him on the podcast too, but at a minimum, even talk.
That would be amazing. Yeah, definitely.
But my takeaway is like a more tactical answer to the question directly is I would listen to a lot of his podcast tour now. He really kind of explains why the next 10 years could actually be a little bit more volatile, even if we take away everything that Jack and I said, where we only see the worst and most extreme things. There actually is a legitimate underpinning here.
And that was great. And just to share my one really quickly as well, is the question itself was saying, are you an optimist or pessimist about politics and financial events in the next 5-10 years? Personally, I'm generally not being a very political person for most of my life. Like, I do follow it, obviously, because it's important. But I've always been quite, divorced from letting it like take over me too much. Obviously, when Trump got elected and Biden election, it impacts everyone because you're hearing about it every day. But if I'm honest, and some people will be annoyed at me saying this, that my day-to-day life hasn't changed much in the last 8-10 years with both presidents. Of course, I know there's lots of people that are impacted by both of their policies in positive and negative ways. So I'm not saying politics doesn't change anything. I'm saying personally, for me as N of one, I literally, if you ask me to guess without knowing the experiences, I wouldn't know the difference, except for the craziness of, like reading the crazy stuff that Trump's saying and all that sort of stuff.
Well, I'll tell you that though, like Bilal, you bring up a good point. The effect, quote unquote, that a lot of people have from, for example, the Trump administration. I mean, just take these Northeastern elites. The effect is all brought on to themselves they whip themselves up into this like ridiculous hysteria and frenzy. But like, if you're a Harvard professor making $300K a year, Trump did not affect your life, dude. Like, get out of here. No, right? It's like
the only thing I'll say is, and the only reason I'm caveating is quite hard, is because I know the truth is I don't know 95% of all the policy stuff anyway, because I don't follow it that closely. Even when we're talking about, the recent stuff, we don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but like the stuff that's impacting people's reproductive life, abortion, like all that stuff.
Right?
Of course, that stuff is going to impact. If you directly want to have an abortion, you can't do that. Of course, that impacts you, and that is politics. But I'm saying, for me personally, that isn't something I've had to think about as much. So it's, again, to clarify, I think politics obviously impacts my life. I'm just saying it's a huge privilege for us to live in a place where
I think that's a larger point, right?
Yeah.
We are absolutely in positions where, and I mentioned it earlier, like I won personally the geographic lottery by being born in Canada.
Yeah, completely. All of us have our own versions of that.
Yeah, exactly. So, but what I'd say is this is I would just pin your point with this is, yes, politics affects our lives. There's no question about it. And yes, politicians do awful things on both sides of the aisle in Canada or in America, as we've spoken about. But I think the other part that is really important to recognize is the entire political industrial complex and the media complex that is married and tied to it.
Red pill segment.
They just want you outraged all the time, constantly outraged, right?
Completely.
It's just an unhealthy situation to be in. And I'll bring it back to our initial point in this entire chat. What can you control? What can you get good at? What can you build? What skills can you do? Because at the end of the day, you can control that a lot more than a Supreme Court decision, right? You can control your ability to take care of your family, to bring value to the world. So just focus on that. That's what I would say to Bilal's political point, is like, that's
kind of what I was going to say as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're not being ignorant. You're just like, I want to control what I control.
It's like there's a certain amount of time, in the day, and energy and mental space I have, and I have to be. You can't
dedicate it to being outraged all the time.
Exactly. So that's kind of how, and that's kind of what I was going to say, is that like all that stuff, of course, is important, and even the financial side, I'd say I'd probably over-indexed on in the last year or two more than I probably should have. But bringing it back, and like, the same way we try to eat healthy food, it's the same thing with the content you take in every day. If you're constantly reading about the worst thing in the world, it's going to impact your mood. It's going to impact what you focus on and the actions you take, unfortunately. And so you can't get away from the fact that is the world we live in. And of course, you shouldn't be ignorant to like all the terrible things happening. But also, like you said, like what can you actually control yourself? That's what I try to focus on as well. So the short answer is to my long-ish answer is that I'm overall an optimist about general humanity. But yeah, in the short, like I'd say in the next 5 years, do I think we're going to be in a recession and have really bad turmoil? Of course, because we've had 12 years of crazy good times, and it's a natural flushing of the system that you have booms and busts. So I'm not exactly optimistic about that side, but I'm optimistic about me and other people having the most control they've ever had if you are lucky enough to live in a place like this or have access to the internet, all the things that we have talked about on this show. And if you don't, there's still plenty of things you do have in your control, and that's all you can really focus on. Do you know what I mean? So that is the answer to that one. Just to wrap it up, boys, I think, unless you had anything else before we wrap up, that question.
Do we have any last questions that are less heavy?
Yeah, I was gonna say let's finish off on a nice one. The all-in one's probably. Someone said, "Give us your thoughts on."
Let's do the all-in one. That's a fun.
Yeah. Okay. So the question was from Antonio. Give us your thoughts on the all-in podcast. I don't care for it. They came off as know-it-alls with horrible takes. Any takers here?
I like it. You know, we always joke that that's the podcast we kind of look up to. But I mean, that's not actually how we think about it. But I think it's a great podcast. I think they are all super accomplished in their fields, and you do not leave there without learning something. And I get the instinct that you may not like the individual personalities. I personally like the four of them, and I like the interactions. And my takeaway is I do listen to that podcast whenever it comes out. I look forward to it, and I think Jason, who is the captain of that, he's the one that kind of put it together. And
he's the host. Yeah,
I will say he's done an incredible job with that, and the growth of it is undeniable. Like to hit.
I mean, it's the top tech podcast for sure.
Yeah,
one of the top business ones.
If you don't like the personalities and the banter, I don't know what to tell you, but you learn something every time you listen to it.
I can see though why, and I agree because I listen to it and I like it, but there's this like Silicon Valley style of discussion that happens that has been happening for some time that I feel like a lot of people, if you're used to it, you kind of accept it. But when you come from outside of that, like I've played it with my girlfriend a few times, and she's tried to listen, it just doesn't like hit for her as much because and also it's four guys, right? Like she's a girl, so sometimes it's harder.
Really loaded, like they're really rich.
Yeah, and like for example, when Chamath is talking about like it's kind of a joke, but he's talking about his $5,000 sweater or the crazy wine. Like I don't mind because it's kind of funny to me, but I can see why if you don't know the joke, if you don't get the joke or you're not like you don't know them enough, it would come across as a little annoying. But yeah, overall, obviously a great podcast. It's probably one of the inspirations for us starting this for sure. Jack, what about you, mate?
I listened to it when it first started for religiously. I thought it was good. I just tailed off. Listen, my podcast consumption is pretty much zero. The only podcasting I'm doing is recording this one right now.
Love it. Love it.
But it's like a bigger commentary on it is just like the ability for people that have, for you to get the perspective of people that have done things that you probably haven't done. Just podcasting as a medium in general is kind of wild. And,
it's amazing to have the access to just hearing that conversation, totally, which would normally be in a poker table in Chamath's house, like, or whatever. And that to me is kind of like, obviously I love podcasts as much as anyone, but to your point, Jack, I will say I also do listen to it less than I used to as well. But overall, I still listen to it once in a while. All right, should we? There's a couple let's wrap it up on a light note. This last couple here. Benji said, "What do you think of the pedestrianisation of Norwich city centre?" I just wanted to mention that because this dude is hilarious.
Chief asks, what is Norwich City?
Norwich is a random place in the UK, and he's asking a ridiculous question.
He's trolling us.
That's class. I love that.
That was good. It was a good question though, so I had to mention it. His name's also Benji, so I don't know. There's more trolling going on. But anyway, Chief also asked, how do I use permissionless apprentice to land a job at McDonald's? Please respond. Also brilliant. And the last question I will say, Trung, we've asked you a few times on this, but Ray asked, could you do a deep dive on Trung's writing?
Oh, that's going to be its own episode, yeah.
Is that its own episode? All right, let's. I think that's going to be a tough one to squeeze in at the end. All right, but I think I really enjoyed this. This was really, really fun.
Yeah,
so,
we're gonna do this. We said it recently.
We might have to do this like once a month or something because
the one we did last time, the building versus betting. I mean, that was organically good. That was great. So yeah,
that came out really. Yeah. That came out really well. Yeah, I think the flow of it is really cool. And as you guys can see, we're trying out a few different formats. This one people have asked us for, so I think we know people wanted it, but. Let us know what you think of this because we always like your feedback. I read every single. We all read your comments and everything in the Telegram chat as well. We always sharing it with each other as well. So thanks again for all the support and love. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. That really just helps. And write a comment. Tell us something that you liked about it, or
throw something on troll the Apple, us. Spotify. Just do something.
You say something funny if you want. Tell us we're terrible. Whatever you want to say. That always helps. and we will see you on the next one. Cheers.